If you own a firearm in this country right now, you need to understand something that most people are completely missing. This isn't about a single case. This isn't about one state. This is about a coordinated shift in how gun owners are being treated under the law. And if you're not paying attention, you could find yourself on the wrong side of a legal line you didn't even know existed. I'm going to break this down for you completely. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what's happening, why it matters to you personally, and what you need to do right now to protect yourself. Stay with me. This gets serious fast. I've spent years working through the legal landscape around firearms, self-defense, and Second Amendment rights. I've watched how the law gets written, how it gets enforced, and most importantly, how ordinary law-abiding gun owners get caught in the crossfire of policy battles they never asked to be part of. What I'm about to walk you through isn't speculation, it's a pattern. And once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. Here's where we are right now. The political and legal climate around firearms in this country goes in cycles. There are periods of relative stability, where gun owners feel like the law is on their side, where court decisions are moving in the right direction, where things feel settled. And then there are moments like this one. Moments where the pressure builds from multiple directions at the same time, where legislation gets pushed at the state and federal level simultaneously, where regulatory agencies start reinterpreting existing rules, where prosecutors begin making examples of people who, by any reasonable standard, did nothing wrong. That's where we are right now. And the thing that should concern you most isn't the big headline bill that everyone's talking about. It's the smaller, quieter moves happening underneath it, the ones that don't make the front page, but have the most direct impact on you. Let me tell you what those are. Let's start with the most important thing you need to understand about this moment. Gun control in this country has almost never won in a single dramatic vote. The way it actually works, the way rights actually erode, is through incremental legal pressure. Small regulatory changes, reinterpretations of existing statutes, prosecutorial discretion being used aggressively against gun owners, local ordinances that create patchwork traps for people who travel with firearms legally. That's the playbook, and it's being run hard right now. Here's what's specifically driving the current pressure. First, there's a renewed push at multiple levels of government to expand what counts as a prohibited person under federal law. This matters enormously. The definition of who is legally barred from owning or possessing a firearm has always been a critical legal boundary. Right now, there are serious efforts to stretch that definition, using mental health records, using certain misdemeanor convictions, using civil court orders, in ways that could sweep up people who never imagined they had a problem. Here's the thing most people don't fully grasp. You don't have to be convicted of a serious felony to lose your Second Amendment rights under current law. And those categories are being actively expanded. Second, there's an intensifying focus on so-called ghost guns and home-built firearms that has led to regulatory shifts affecting not just those specific items, but creating new documentation requirements and compliance expectations that affect conventional gun owners too. Third, and this is the one I want you to pay close attention to, there is a growing pattern of using red flag laws, background check system errors, and civil liability exposure to target gun owners who have done everything right. Everything right, and they're still ending up in legal jeopardy. Let me explain exactly how that happens. Here's the catch that almost nobody talks about. The legal risk for gun owners in this environment isn't primarily about doing something obviously wrong. It's about the gap between what you think the law says and what law enforcement or a prosecutor believes it says in the moment they're dealing with you. That gap is enormous right now, and it's being exploited. Take red flag laws as the clearest example. More states have them. The standards for triggering them vary wildly. In some jurisdictions, a single phone call from someone with a grudge, a neighbor, an ex, a disgruntled coworker, can result in law enforcement showing up to seize your firearms before any hearing has been held, before you've been charged with anything, before you've had any opportunity to respond. You are guilty until proven innocent. Your property is gone until you fight to get it back. And the legal costs of that fight, entirely on you. Now, I want to be fair here. Red flag laws aren't inherently unconstitutional in every application. Courts have ruled both ways on this, and the Supreme Court has not definitively settled all of the due process questions. But the practical reality is that these laws are being used more frequently, being interpreted more broadly, and in some jurisdictions, being weaponized against people who pose absolutely no threat. That's not a hypothetical. That's documented. So here's the reframe I want you to take from this section. The conversation around your Second Amendment rights can't stop at, do I have the right to own a gun? That's the starting point, not the finish line. The real question is, do you have the practical, legal, and procedural ability to keep that right under current conditions? And for a growing number of people, the honest answer is increasingly uncertain. Let's move up a level, because this doesn't stop at state laws. There has been a sustained effort at the federal level to use existing statutory authority, not new legislation, but existing authority, to impose regulatory requirements on gun owners and dealers that effectively function as new law without going through Congress. This is significant, because new legislation is visible. People mobilize, advocates push back, there are hearings and votes and public debate. Regulatory action is quieter, it moves faster. And by the time most people realize what happened, it's already in effect and already being enforced. The specific areas where this is happening right now involve serialization requirements for certain firearms and parts, expanded definitions under existing federal statutes that change what counts as a firearm, and pressure on licensed dealers through more aggressive inspection and compliance enforcement that has downstream effects on the market. Here's why that last one matters directly to you as an individual gun owner. When dealers get squeezed, when compliance costs go up, when the risk of losing a license goes up, that translates into fewer dealers, harder access, and more barriers between you and your legal right to acquire firearms. It's an indirect pressure campaign. It's designed to be indirect, and it works. Now, here's where I want to sharply reframe something most gun owners believe. A lot of people think the Supreme Court has their back. They cite Heller, they cite Bruen, and look, those decisions matter. They are genuinely significant. The Bruen decision in particular shifted the constitutional framework for evaluating gun laws in a real and meaningful way, requiring that regulations be grounded in the historical tradition of firearms regulation in this country. But here's what Bruen and Heller do not do. They do not protect you in the moment you're dealing with law enforcement at 11 o'clock at night. They do not protect you in the gap between when a law is passed and when it's litigated. They do not protect you from prosecutorial decisions, from red flag petitions, from civil liability exposure in a self-defense scenario, or from a background check system error that flags you incorrectly. Supreme Court precedent is enormously valuable, but it operates on a timescale of years and decades. The legal risks you're facing right now operate on a timescale of minutes and months. And that gap, the gap between your constitutional rights and your practical day-to-day legal exposure, is where people get hurt. I want to say something directly here because I think it needs to be said. A significant number of the people being swept up in the current legal pressure around firearms are not the people anyone should be worried about. They are responsible gun owners, veterans, people who went through every required process, checked every required box, followed every required rule, and are still finding themselves legally exposed because the rules changed, or because someone with authority decided to interpret the rules differently, or because they happened to be in the wrong state when they crossed a line that doesn't exist in most other states. These are not criminals. They are people who trusted that if they did things the right way, they would be protected. That trust is being violated. And I think gun owners deserve to hear that stated plainly, rather than buried in legal qualifications. The good news, and there is good news, is that awareness is the beginning of protection. Understanding the current landscape, understanding where your actual exposure points are, and taking deliberate steps to reduce that exposure is something you can do right now, today. Let me walk you through exactly what those steps look like. This is the part of the conversation where things get actionable. If you're a law-abiding gun owner, here is what I want you to think seriously about in the current climate. First, know your state's laws cold. Not just the broad strokes, the details. Specifically, understand your state's red flag statute. Does it exist? What's the threshold for a petition? What are your rights in the process? And how quickly can you get legal help if one is filed against you? This is not optional knowledge right now. This is baseline. Second, understand the gap between federal and state law. What is legal at the state level is not always in alignment with federal regulatory expectations, and that gap is growing. Particularly if you own items or configurations that have been subject to regulatory changes in recent years, you need to verify your current compliance. Don't assume that what was legal 2 years ago is automatically still clean today. Third, have a legal resource identified before you need it. One of the most common mistakes gun owners make is waiting until they have a problem to start looking for a Second Amendment attorney. By then, you're already behind. Know who you would call. Know what organizations provide legal defense support for gun owners in your jurisdiction. Have that information somewhere accessible. Fourth, take the documentation of your legal acquisition seriously. If your firearms were acquired legally, your paperwork, receipts, and records are not just administrative clutter, they are your legal defense. Treat them that way. Fifth, be extremely careful about transporting firearms across state lines. This has always been an area of risk, but in the current climate, it is particularly dangerous. Reciprocity is not universal. What you think is protected by federal transport law has nuances that have tripped up extremely careful people. Let me pull this together before we close. Here's what's actually happening. Gun owners are facing coordinated pressure from multiple directions simultaneously. Regulatory action, expanded prohibited person categories, aggressive use of red flag laws, and an enforcement environment that is less forgiving than it was even a few years ago. Here's what most people get wrong. They believe their constitutional rights and their day-to-day legal protection are the same thing. They're not. Supreme Court victories matter enormously in the long game, but they don't insulate you from immediate legal risk. Here's what you can do. Know your state's law in detail. Understand the federal-state gap. Have legal resources identified in advance. Protect your acquisition documentation, and be especially careful about transportation. The bottom line is this: gun ownership in this country has always required a level of legal literacy that most people don't get automatically. Nobody hands you a complete legal briefing when you walk out of the gun store. Nobody tells you at the range what your exposure points are in your specific state. That responsibility has always fallen on the individual gun owner. But right now, in this specific moment, the cost of not having that knowledge is higher than it's been in a long time. This is not the time to be complacent. This is the time to be informed, to be deliberate, and to take the steps that ensure you can exercise your rights without inadvertently surrendering them. You earned those rights. You followed the rules. You deserve to keep them. If this video helped you understand something about the current environment that you didn't fully see before, that's exactly what this channel is here to do. Subscribe, turn on notifications, because this landscape is moving fast, and the people who stay ahead of it are the people who stay protected. We're going to keep covering every major development that matters to law-abiding gun owners. Not with panic, not with politics, with analysis, clarity, and the kind of practical guidance that actually helps. Stay informed, stay legal, stay protected. And remember this: rights not understood are rights not defended. I'll see you in the next one.